Joining us now is Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. He sits on the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Pamela, thanks for having me.
So let's dive right into it. Not surprisingly, Russia is dismissing this European emergency summit. It was a remarkable show of support for Ukraine. How important was that gathering just 2 days after that Oval Office blow-up?
Well, has been reported this was a planned gathering, and it certainly is important, and it certainly is consistent with what Donald Trump has said and what the U.S. policy has been, that the Europeans need to pull together, show increased support and increased contribution to Ukraine and to the cause for Ukraine. But I think what's also important here is that the Europeans need to to counsel Zelensky, having just come off of this failed minerals and economics deal. President Zelensky showed up in the Oval Office for what was supposed to be a signing ceremony for a minerals and economics deal, and he inappropriately turned that into a debate over American security guarantees as a precondition for peace negotiations. He should have concluded the deal that he had negotiated. He flew here to sign that deal, and instead he caused it to be a debate, and it was a lost opportunity for him.
I think there's certainly a debate over who started this debate, right? Because it was the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who initially pressed him, and then it devolved from there. Do you think that perhaps that deal should have been signed before that pressure was put on him? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think Zelensky should have been focused on why he came, and certainly I think there's in the tenor and tone that was in the room, there's plenty of blame to go around. But Zelensky came here with a sole purpose, and that was to stand next to the President of the United States, walk out with a deal that he had negotiated. He would have elevated Ukraine and walked out with a deal that was to the benefit of Ukraine and to the benefit of Zelensky. He would have been able to stand next to President Trump and walk out with an elevated relationship between Ukraine and the United States. And instead, he made the whole event about what is an impediment to the peace negotiations, and that is his concept of wanting a precondition of American security guarantees before peace negotiations. That's a cart before the horse. He should not be asking for those, a demand of security guarantees before peace negotiations.
You said there's a lot of blame to go around. What do you mean by that?
Well, certainly the tenor in the room was not the tenor that should have occurred. However, President Zelensky should have been focused on the goal and objective of what he could have achieved for Ukraine.
And I think, Europeans are clearly looking at this in terms of the emergency summit. They certainly rally around Zelensky in a renewed way after the meeting, regardless of them trying to figure out, how they're going to move forward given this U.S. dynamic. You are the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. You've been a vocal advocate for robust military aid to Ukraine. Let's share what's on your website. As you say, as this administration, this is happening as this administration distances itself from Ukraine. You say, quote, when we talk about support for Ukraine, it's not just about dollars and cents, it's about our shared values. If Putin continues unchecked, he will not stop at Ukraine. Authoritarianism cannot win. So that's what's on your site. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the U.S. is now largely aligned with Moscow. Does that concern you?
First off, it's absolutely not true. I mean,
why is Russia saying that? That's Russia's perception. Does that concern you?
Right. So Russia can say what it wants. Russia remains the evil empire. They're the ones who are killing an unbelievable number of Ukrainians. They are the aggressor here, everyone, certainly the Europeans, the United States, have stood against their aggression. President Trump has, and even in the Oval Office, he said, this killing needs to stop. The goal here is peace, both for the Ukrainians and really for Europe. That is the goal, and I think it is achievable.
So given your view, do you think Trump should be tougher on Putin then? Because as I just said, Moscow thinks the U.S. is realigning with it. There are people here in the country who believe the U.S. is now realigning with
Well,
Russia?
I think he is. We're continuing to provide
You think
arms.
he's being tough on Putin?
I
What
think
examples do you have of that?
Well, first off, he's the first to provide lethal weapons. Remember, Obama would not provide lethal weapons to Ukraine. I mean, we had Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, was on the floor of the House begging for lethal weapons. He said, "I cannot win a war with blankets." And President Trump was the first to send lethal weapons. Those lethal weapons were used to repel Russia's tanks as they were trying to descend on Kyiv. So that's true. So
but I'm talking about this administration.
They're continuing to provide lethal weapons right now. What the Trump administration is doing is trying to bring everyone from the table. They've just now brought the Russians to the table to begin the discussions to say, let's begin peace negotiations. That's incredibly important. The goal that just occurred at the White House was bring Ukraine and the United States together in an economic deal so that Ukraine and the United States could stand together. President Trump and President Zelensky could sign an economic deal that they could take forward and then begin these negotiations to end this terrible war.
Just very quickly, though, the New York Times is reporting Trump is meeting with some of his top national security aides, and they're going to discuss whether to withhold some of this aid to Ukraine after what happened on Friday. I mean,
that should not be the case. We have got to continue to support Ukraine, but Ukraine has got to come to the table in a meaningful way so that these peace negotiations can go forward and that the United States has a shot of ending this war.
All right, Congressman Mike Turner, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.